It wasn't just last week we were left on a cliffhanger with finding out what Kirito's weapon transformation would be, but now we're legit left on a cliffhanger in this episode with Kirito and Alice being sucked out of the tower and potentially falling to their deaths. But let's be real here, they're not going to die, okay? Let's be honest. I mean, they may fall, they may go all the way back to the start on floor 1, but they're not going to die. Common sense. But the point still stands, though, is that we were left on quite the cliffhanger, and it makes you wonder what's going to happen. How is Yu-Gi-Oh going to get back to them? You know, is Kirito going to be okay? Because, I mean, when we look at everything that we've already seen from this arc of SEO, is that Kirito isn't really the one to finish the fights. He may do a lot of things, a lot of fighting. I mean, in this episode, he did fight the Integrity Knight, and he did, in a way, beat her. But it wasn't just him that did it. It was thanks to Yu-Gi-Oh! Really setting up Kirito to be able to do that. And so, when you see this episode, and how Kirito gets sucked out of the building, which I'll talk about in a second, you're like, how is Kirito going to win against Alice? Because watching the fight between the two in this episode, it's clear as day that Alice is the better sword fighter. She is definitely better with the sword, and she was cornering Kirito literally up against the wall in this episode. So, yeah, the cards are stacked against him. It makes you wonder, you know, what's going to happen. How is Kirito going to be okay? Is Yu-Gi-Oh going to have to go down there and save him? What will happen? A lot of questions. Honestly, I have no idea what's going to happen. Because like I said now, I'm anime only. I have no idea what to expect. So I'm actually pretty excited to see where the story is going to go. So let's talk about what happened this episode, or mainly the sucking scene to where Kirito and Alice got sucked out of the tower and potentially falling to their deaths. So I'm under the impression what happened in that moment most likely had something to do with the pressure outside being very different with the pressure inside of the building. Because if you know anything about how air pressure works, or just being high up there in the atmosphere, you can assume the higher you go, obviously, especially in this tower, the air pressure is going to kind of get lower and lower, and the inside pressure has to be condensed in a way to where it needs to maintain what it had at the bottom. And so, as they were going up, keeping this consistent air pressure in the tower, because there's no windows. If you really look at the tower, there's really no windows whatsoever. And so, when they're going up these floors, getting higher and higher, if a hole breaks open, they're going to just get, you know, sucked out. And that's what happened. You know, Kirito and Alice got sucked out of the building, I'm assuming thanks to air pressure being different outside compared to inside. It's kind of like being in a plane. You know, the cabin having to be pressurized. And if there's a hole, you know, things get a little bit bonkers, wacky, and you just, yeah, it's a bad situation for everyone that's in the cabin of the plane. So that's the point here, is that I believe it wasn't just the fact of the explosion and, you know, the wall breaking and they just, like, fell over. Literally, you heard the air sucking them out of the hole. So, yeah, that's what I'm assuming. I'm assuming that's what happened. And the magical fixing of the wall is probably a spell from the administrator to keep the tower always, you know, perfect, in good tip-top condition, for it won't crumble and fall apart, and also keep everything pressurized. So, yeah. Anyways, can we talk about the Shikais or Bankais of Kirito, Alice, and Yu-Gi-Oh? Like, okay, I know people, you know, are probably like, what are you talking about, Why are you mentioning Bankais from, Bleach? I mean, take a moment and look at Kirito's sword transformation to Alice's and Yu-Gi-Oh's. It's very reminiscent of Bleach, and I want to point out, you remember Sinbul and Sakura? You know, what was used in Bleach? Or do you remember Hoen Maru, whatever, how you pronounce it? And then Getsuga Tensho? All three of those Bankais, or Shikais, were technically used for Kirito, Alice, and Yu-Gi-Oh's weapon. Like, their weapons transform in a way that's very similar to Bleach. And I'm just like, what? Like, whoa. Like, I honestly did not realize that when I read the earlier stuff of, like, Sword Art Online. And now seeing this, I'm like, it is very Bleach-like. It's very reminiscent of Bleach. Like, you can really see just the similarities of Alice's sword with, you know, Sinbul and Sakura. You're like, that's that's identical. It really is. And then, you know, Kirito's, like, weapon and how it turned into Getsuga Tensho. Or, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh's how it turned into Maru. It's just, like, there's so many similarities. So you cannot say there's not. Because there is. Very obvious there is. Which, you know what? I accept that. I'm all for that. I'm all for Bankai, Shikai type weapon fights. Because, you know, despite how much hate Bleach can get and how the ending arc was a mess and rushed, I do like Bleach, and I do like the fights. That is something I always did like. I love the unique abilities with the weapons, and so, you know what? If we get more of that, bring it. Bring it. I want it more, SAO. Give me more of that. But okay, what should I get into? What should I talk about? Okay, so, let's talk about Kirito's fight with Alice. So, Alice, as I've already said in this video, was obviously the better sword fighter than Kirito. She pushed him up against the wall, and I think there's probably a lot more to this than we actually got from the anime. I'm assuming things here, and you light novel readers, you can clarify in the comments below. Please do so. I actually would like to be clarified if I am wrong. I'm assuming the reason why Kirito's weapon wasn't really able to combat Alice's was because Alice's weapon was stronger. Because we do know about command authority or weapon authority. We know that weapons do have higher levels, or different object authority have higher levels. And I'm assuming Alice's weapon is a very high authority compared to Kirito's. Even though Kirito's weapon is based off, like, the Giga Cedar Tree or whatever, you know, seeing the description to Alice's sword and how it's literally from, like, the first object ever placed in this world by God itself, it makes sense why the object would be so powerful. And why, you know, maybe it was able to overpower everything else in this episode was because of how strong it is. So, yeah, I'm under that impression. I'm assuming that is the reason why Kirito was really getting beat back so easily, was because just how OP her weapon is. Now, I'm not saying that Alice's sword fighting is bad or weak. I mean, she's obviously really good at it. I just think that her equipment was definitely better than Kirito's, and that matters a lot. In games and stuff, equipment is a big thing. When you're going up against the boss, if you don't have the right equipment, you're gonna get messed up. That's just how it works in RPGs. And this is technically like an MMORPG, and if your weapon isn't up to standards to face that opponent, well, GG to you. You know, wrap it up, you're done. Get out of here. So, yeah, I feel like that is what happened. Also, I do want to mention, I love Alice's design. Like, I've seen it before with illustrations and stuff when I was reading the light novel. I have seen her design her golden armor and all of that, even before the anime came out. But seeing it in the anime, seeing her design when, like, she's sitting under the tree, or technically her sword, and you just see how she gets up, and then, you know, the brightness just, you know, makes it to where you can see her full face and all that, and her body without, you know, the shadow. Like, she has a really beautiful design. It stands out, and every time I see her character, I'm reminded of Gilgamesh. Like, a saber-like Gilgamesh from Fate Stay Night. Hopefully I'm not the only one to kind of think that, but that's the impression I got when I saw her character in this episode, because, I mean, when you look at her shoulder pads, the way her weapon is, and all that, it reminds me so much of Gilgamesh and Saber that uses Excalibur because of the designs. It does make me wonder, at the very least, if the writer was inspired in some ways by Fate. I mean, Fate is a really big series. It's an important series in Japan. I mean, the movie currently, Heaven's Feel, is selling like hotcakes over there. So, I mean, it makes sense why video would be inspired by the Nasuverse. But still, just like seeing Alice's design, it makes me wonder if in some ways the writer was inspired. I could be wrong, but I don't know. It seems so similar. But okay, what else to talk about? I guess let's talk about the beginning portion of the episode with Kirito's fight with, you know, the vice captain of the Integrity Knights. So the vice captain was defeated, and obviously it's thanks to, you know, Kirito and Yu-Gi-Oh working together to bring down the vice captain, and Kirito won. He did win in the end, and nobody really was wanting to help out the vice captain and just left her alone, and Kirito had to do the honors to be able to save the vice captain. Which, by the way, I mean, it really speaks a lot about Kirito's character, because we know a lot already. Kirito is a guy that even if it's an NPC slash AI, he still looks at them as a person, like they have their own rights and, you know, they're a living being. So he wouldn't want these people in front of him to really just die. Kirito does have, you know, bloodied hands. He has done some despicable things even in Season 1 or in the light novels, but he doesn't want to do it if he can help it. And in this case, he wanted to help her because she wasn't technically a bad person. It's not even the fact that she's being brainwashed as an Integrity Knight, but it's very clear from the past, like, 100 years or so she's been around, she is someone that had her own goals, her passions, desires, love, and all of that, and she wasn't really a bad person. Kirito saw that, and he wanted to make sure that she would be A-okay. And so he gave up his only dagger that was actually going to be used for the Administrator, which really puts them in a pickle, because they have to use the other dagger to help out Alice, and then that would mean that they would have no dagger to be able to fight the Administrator, which it was stated that the Administrator is in a unawakened state, but it doesn't change the fact that the Administrator is basically a GM. She is someone that is the game master. You cannot fight someone that has the, like, rights of the entire game. They control everything, the command list and all that. It's pretty much stupid to do so. So I am curious on how they're going to be able to bring down the Administrator, especially if they don't have the dagger anymore. That was like their trump card, but now not having it, they're going to have to find their own way. Oh yes, by the way, I do think the scene when Kirito is crying out and yelling for the Integrity Knights to come save her, I believe he wasn't just yelling for the NPCs or AI in the tower to help out. Something in my heart tells me he was also yelling at Wrath. Like, Wrath, why are you letting these characters die like this? Like, you need to intervene. I know you're watching and investigating. Come in and save them. You know, heal them. Do whatever. I know you have the power to do it. And I think that's what Kirito was also doing. He was crying out probably to Wrath or anyone watching to help out, but obviously no one came, which really upset him. Oh yeah, one last thing, actually, I do love the elevator scene. I feel very bad for the operator. I do hope she has a role in the future, and she does get another calling, because she's had a very lonely life. So I think that's pretty much about it. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy my content, you know, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.